There's been so much press about AI, but is it practiced or implemented differently in various parts of the world? We're on location with Romain Fayolle of Holocene from Berlin, Germany, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Pleasure to have you. What does Holocene do?
So Holocene is a tech company. We are based in Berlin, in Germany, and we are leveraging the new technologies like machine learning to ease cross-border supply chain. So helping professional working in international procurement, international distribution as well in the other end of the supply chain with artificial intelligence. This is what we do.
And how exactly is artificial intelligence integrated? Is that your business model or is it a portion of your business model?
Yes, it's actually the core of our business model to use machine learning in order to automate a lot of tasks. So we build a core knowledge around those technologies, and our customers, our users can have access to those analysis capabilities via two products. We have a software, a SaaS, and we have an API as well to be integrated with our customers' products or services.
Many people, Romain, are concerned that AI is going to replace humans at some point. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Interesting. I have another opinion, actually, about it. And maybe I can demystify this concern. I think AI will not kill jobs or replace humans because I think AI is a tool. However, I think that professionals with AI knowledge or with skills will have a competitive advantage on the market against today's professional opposition. Like every single field is in transformation, gaining from new technologies, and definitely AI skilled or AI aware professionals are going to replace today's professionals. So I hope personally that the professionals today, whatever their field, they will be trained thanks to learning and development programs, or take proactive personal initiatives to learn those new technologies in order to use those new tools.
Romain, how would you define artificial intelligence?
So let's go back to simple words. In my family, I have cousins. They are very young, like between 3 to 10 years old. And when I talked with them last Christmas, when I explained to them artificial intelligence, what's important is artificial. Like the natural intelligence is us, and artificial intelligence, it's a tool in order to help us to do some tasks. For example, recognizing documents. What in our case, we analyze documents like invoice or packing list, and an artificial intelligence is able to identify those documents, for example. So to read a document, to understand a word, and to classify this document.
Romain, what do you see as the 2 or 3 biggest trends in AI over, say, the next year or 2, maybe 3 or 4 years in the future?
Wow, you like difficult questions, Greg. For sure, it will be exciting. AI is already exciting, like digital twins in the industry, making simulations, predictions thanks to AI. But it's difficult for me. Maybe I'm not a forecast expert, but to forecast next 2-3 years, it's difficult even because we have seen new technologies. But there is ChatGPT. We have a plethora of applications already. So what will happen after a few years? This is difficult to say. However, for sure, it will be exciting because we see the potential of those new technologies. And I think the potentiality that we have at our fingertips is already an exciting thing.
So you came from France, you moved to Germany to study engineering. You've gotten a great job at Holocene, and you're completely in when it comes to AI, which is terrific, by the way. Congratulations. Any concerns about AI trends in the next few years?
Yes. So yeah, for that, yeah, I'm a bit concerned about 2 things. You develop AI very fast. However, who develops AI are humans. What we do usually when we have machine learning is that we have a data set, and we train the AI with this data set. So it's always a limited data set against models that have been chosen. So an AI is in say a bit limited about the training, and there's always a human touch behind it. So my concern is that AI could be used in a bad way to shape a future that could be worse than the present today. However, I think it's not going to be the case, and we are going to develop it in a positive way. And my second concern, because the pace of development and evolution of this field is very fast, I can see that it's faster than the pace of evolution of the regulations. Kind of the same with other technologies like cryptocurrency, blockchain, Web3. I see that regulations, politics, and I'm afraid that in some cases, some people could use technology in fields where there is a legal vacuum in order to use it in a malicious way. And this is my second concern, yeah.
Romain, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
Romain Fayolle, dialing in from Berlin, Germany, talking about AI and Holocene. When it comes to machine learning, there's no such thing as reprogramming. The computer, once it starts learning, keeps going and going, and if you're not happy with the results or you make a mistake, you have to start all over again. We're on location with Hal Reed, who's an independent consultant to Fortune 500 companies, and he's going to tell us why. Hal, welcome to the Language of Business.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hal, let's start at the beginning. How did you get started with AI?
Oh, for that, you got to go back to 1990. I was a senior in college, and I was a comp sci major, and there was a visiting professor whose specialty was AI, which was, a relatively new field back then. Neural nets were really just the new thing that people were playing with. That's the basis of what we now call machine learning.
Talk to us about the success of machine learning, especially in light of all of the chatbot hoopla that's all over the news today.
The way that I describe it is that something that is capable of being trained to do basic tasks, anything that sort of an unskilled workforce can do. Now, the reality is they don't do those tasks nearly as well as an actual human does. They are very convenient at this point. They're pretty much ubiquitous. The best example that I could give you is think about all the experiences that you personally have had with autocorrect or with dictation, okay? That is machine learning at its best. Now, the other area, expert systems, that's the side of AI that does the more advanced things that, require a much more skilled workforce. And building one of those requires a lot of upfront investment, which has just not been the trend in technology investment over the last 10 years. Long story short, a given neural net solution, it is trained to do a very specific task, and that is all that it can do. And literally, no one knows exactly how it works, including the neural net itself.
In preparing for this interview, I keep stumbling upon the error of machine learning, which in some cases can be up to 30%. Tell us more about that, please.
The thing about neural net machine learning systems is that you start with base data and you train it to recognize certain patterns within that base data. And then once you've done that, you can hand it new data that it's never seen before, and it'll go off and it will try to match those same patterns in the new data. Well, the thing is, when it encounters things that it's not familiar with, that it hasn't been adequately trained to, it fails on those. We have seen that in the field all over the place. Some of the stories are very funny, some of them are not at all funny. To give a very simple example, if I take really, really high-end machine learning and I put it in a car and I teach that car how to self-drive on the streets of Palo Alto, California. After a while, it'll get really good at driving on the streets of Palo Alto, California. Well, if I pick up that car and I bring it to downtown Boston in, say, February, you're going to get very different results. If we're doing facial recognition, if I only feed it the faces of men, then in the field, it starts seeing pictures of women. It doesn't know what to do with them. The bias problem is the data that was used to train a machine learning system. Often that's overlooked early in projects. or maybe everybody's aware of it, but they don't actually know what the long-term influence is going to be. And so where the learning algorithm, where that becomes the bias problem, is when it's released into the real world and it's put into production. And all of a sudden, it doesn't recognize that pattern, doesn't recognize that pattern, doesn't recognize that pattern, is causing real world problems. So we just invested $20 million in this particular system, and now we learn that it's got this fundamental flaw. It's unfixable. There was some news not that long ago about a very, very, very promising looking new targeting system that had been commissioned by a branch of the U.S. military. And it worked great in every test that was run. But every test that was run from the same camera angle. They introduced the reality of different camera angles in the real world. And guess what? Miserable failure. Now, that's a problem.
How software is designed to be modified as you use it in order to yield better results. But as I said at the opening, if it's not working, we're told that you literally have to start all over from scratch. Is there any middle ground? Is there any such thing as a compromise?
A machine learning model is written in a programming language, but there's a point at which it takes over on its own and starts doing its own feedback loops to figure out to optimize. That's why they work in the first place. I mean, again, back to, these things were first theoretically put together in the late 80s. They started building them a little bit later. And after a lot of investment, we've proven that, they can do it. There's a really big, complicated data model with all sorts of connections within. That's the neural net. But the only thing that we care about is what goes into the system and what comes out of the system. We don't actually know what happens inside the system. It's the black box thing. We can't go in and just say, oh, we need you to now recognize that eyes can also be green. Now, if at the outset, all of the parameters are understood, then you have much more control and you can tweak that sort of thing. But here's the problem. The moment you start actually understanding all the parameters at the outset, that's much more on the expert system side of things, where, the question is, how many basic rules do you feed into the system? In machine learning, from a purely pragmatic standpoint, we want to minimize the number of base rules, the number of hours of developer input that are required to get the thing up and running. So if you have 5 to 10 years to lay out all of the fundamentals before you start letting the neural net go over, you can then tweak those fundamentals and you can reprogram it. But at that point, we have built an expert system, which is the very thing that we don't generally do, because who's got 5 to 10 years? Find me an investment firm that is interested in something they're not going to see a return on investment within a 10-year period.
Hal, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Hal Reed, independent consultant for Fortune 500 companies. Thank you for joining us today on The Language of Business.